Well, good morning, church. Unfortunately, most organizations, most churches, most Christians are known for what they're against instead of what they're for. And in this series, the idea for us to take away is that God is for us. Griff talked about that last weekend. You can find that message online. God is for us, and if God is for us, not only who can be against us, but we should be for the people around us. We should be for our circles of influence. We should be for our communities, whether you're watching in Andrews and Monahans or online in some other city in the Permian Basin, because God is for the Permian Basin. So if we're followers of Christ, then it's on us to be for the Basin, because God's for the Basin. So let me break this down. What does it mean? To be for something is not to be opposed to it, to be in favor of it, right? But what is the Basin, you might ask? Maybe you're new here or you don't know what the Permian Basin is. When many people, I think, believe the Permian Basin is just Midland and Odessa. But the Permian Basin is quite a bit larger than that. In fact, the Permian Basin is over 250 miles across and over 300 miles long. It stretches here into New Mexico. And we did some research in-house this week. There are 31 cities in the Permian Basin that we believe could support a Crossroads campus. So there is a whole lot more work to do than the 3 campuses we have. This is the Permian Basin. When Jesus was on the earth, he said, hey, guess what? I want you to go out into the world. I want you to go to Jerusalem, Judea, and to the ends of the earth. And so for us, the Permian Basin, it's our city. It's our region. It's where we start if we're going to be for the Basin. Now you know what we're talking about. And now you know what it means to be for the Basin. If I haven't met you, my name is Kenny. And I'm thrilled today to share with you what it looks like to put the legs to what it means to be for the Basin. All right, if you haven't heard for the Basin enough, you're going to hear it, you're going to see it, you're going to take it with you, and you're going to see it every time you drive by the highway on whatever campus you're on, because we believe this is a redefining moment of our church, a redefining moment in our culture, that churches can be known for what they're for and not just what they're against. Have you ever gotten bad service somewhere? Yeah, you're giggling, right? And I use the word giggling. You're giggling because the Permian Basin is not known for having great service. In fact, many of us have probably had bad service experiences. And what do we do when we have a bad experience? We oftentimes make a decision on how we're going to shop or spend our resources in the future. When I was growing up, we went to a place called Haas's, and their theme was Haas's is hospitality. Like, that was their tagline. They had this song. I'm not willing to sing it for you. You can Google it later, all right? But Haas's was like a little steakhouse. And when I was growing up, my family would go there periodically. And I was real young the last time that we ever went to Haas's, because we had one of those experiences. You know what I'm saying? Right? The kind where mom and dad storm out and dad gets in the car and something is happening in the front seat that, as a kid, I don't really know what's going on, but I know it's not good for the people inside that building that we just walked out of. Right? I know that we're not going to be allocating much of our eating out budget to this restaurant anymore. And so whatever the experience was, it was awful. It was sworn off. It was no longer on our list of places to go. And for the next 15 years, when we went out to eat, it was Red Lobster instead of Haas's. Well, like 6 months or so ago, I went back to the house. My parents live in Pennsylvania. And I don't tell them when I'm speaking because I don't like them to know I'm telling stories about them. But a couple of months ago, I went back there and I said, hey, what are we doing tonight? They said, let's go out and get something to eat. I said, great. I said, where are we going to go? They said, there's this great restaurant. It has a fantastic salad bar. You're going to love it. I said, oh, what's it called? They said, Haas's. You mean like that place we swore off 30 years ago, Haas's? The place that's hospitality that wasn't so hospitable, right? I mean, it had come full circle, right? And we do that, right? Because we make decisions sometimes based on one experience. We allow one person from that organization, from that vendor, from that restaurant, from that company to define the entirety of the rest of the company. And I encourage you, don't be that person for the church if you're a follower of Christ. And if you've had that experience in the past, don't hang on to it, because the church is broader than one person. I want you to think about the worst customer experience you've ever had in your life. The worst one, or the best if you're just an optimist and you have to think about something positive, all right? If that's you, go there, fine. You don't get to participate in this example. So the worst experience in my life, I was 300 miles away. It was the worst experience of my life. My wife was pregnant. It was cold, the middle of the winter. I was away. She was hungry. She needed some food. So she called the local pizza joint here in Odessa. I'm not going to tell you which one because I don't even know that I remembered. I purged it from my mind so that I didn't have to be against them forever because I learned from my parents' experience, right? So she called the pizza joint. They said it'll be there in an hour. Well, you know what happens. An hour goes by. Where's the pizza? Not at the house, right? So she calls a half an hour later, what's going on? It'll be right there. Another half an hour goes by, another 15 minutes, another half hour, whatever it is. 2.5 hours later, the pizza guy pulls up to the house where my pregnant wife is terrified to get on the road. She's starving, right? The guy pulls up the house, he gets out of the car, he pulls the little pizza container warming thingy. I'm sure that's the official name they use in the training. And he walks up to the door, knocks on the door, opens the little pizza container holdy thingy, and you know what's inside? Nothing. He forgot the pizza. Prego wife goes nuts. We're not allowed in that Domino's. I'm just kidding. It wasn't Domino's and she didn't go nuts. It just makes for a better story. I mean, worst customer service ever, right? You completely forgot the pizza. What's your job title? Pizza delivery guy. How do you forget the pizza? I mean, awful. And so in our minds, we can get there, right? We're like, I'm never ordering pizza from them again. I'm never doing that again. And bad customer service, it can frustrate anyone, especially if we have the view that we're supposed to be served. And in many cases, it is appropriate, culturally, it is appropriate to expect good service. It is appropriate to expect excellence. You should hear at Crossroads. But for those of us who are followers of Christ, perhaps we could consider a new perspective. Perhaps we could consider something different than just being for the things that are for us. Maybe we could choose to be for things that aren't as for us as others. When I was in the service industry, I used to work as a waiter, and it was literally a penalty to be scheduled to serve tables on Sunday from our boss. If you screwed up during the week, you got scheduled to work on Sunday. You know why? Because Sunday, all the Christians showed up after church. They didn't tip, and they were rude. I don't know if they were mad that they just got out of church and gave all their money to God, but they were mad, and they let everybody know it. So that's the perception that kind of permeates in our culture, whatever the experience is. We're going to choose to be for the Basin. Instead of being known as a bad tipper or a rude customer, what if we chose to be for the Basin? What if we chose to be for serving people? What if we chose to serve the Basin? Now, that's a pretty substantial mental shift. And let me offer you this as kind of a foundation if you want to make a mental shift. Serving is more than motions. It's more than motions. It's not just walking through and doing things. It's more than that. What we do matters. The heart, the spirit of what we're doing matters. In 1329, a guy named Robert the Bruce, this is a story I found in one of my favorite books that formed my life probably a decade ago. And Robert the Bruce was an English king. And he was on his deathbed, and he had asked if a worthy knight would come to him. And when he died, this is kind of gross, so it's not lunchtime, you'll be fine. But he said when he died, he wanted his heart embalmed separately from his body so that his heart could go to the Holy Land. That's what he wanted when he died. And so Robert the Bruce, on his deathbed, this guy named James Douglas was a great knight in the kingdom. He was there and accepted the challenge. He said, I will do it. I'll take it. So Robert dies, and the body is embalmed. And the heart is embalmed in a little container. And James Douglas wears that container around his heart and under his shirt until the following spring in 1330. And James is then assigned, as many knights are in that era, to go down to Spain. And so they go down to Spain to fight the Moors in this battle. And at the height of the battle, death is both certain and imminent. He rips out the heart from inside of his shirt and he throws it into the enemy. And he rallies the troops around him by saying, fight for the heart of your king. Motive matters, church. Motive matters. And for them, fighting for the heart of their king mattered. This is how Jesus said it in the New Testament, that this is what Jesus said about serving, because our motive is so important. He said, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to what? Serve and give his life as a ransom for many. In the book of Matthew, He says, if anyone gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward. In the book of John, this is one of the craziest and most humbling experiences that we can learn from when we talk about serving, and almost was going to be what we talked about today, but God led us someplace different. But it's a great story to read later in John 13. It says, after that, he poured water into a basin, not the Permian kind, just the regular kind, and he began to wash. That was funny. You just let that slide. Don't let that slide. He poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. He didn't dye the feet, he dried the feet. But Jesus in this experience is washing dirty feet. He's doing because he's serving, because serving was so important to him because he knew this. If you remember geometry, I think that's geometry or maybe algebra, motivation or motive is greater than motions. Our motivation is greater than motion. So let that serve as a foundation for what it means to be for the Basin as we serve the Basin. Our motive matters. Motive is important. Why we're doing what we're doing matters. Just showing up for 30 years to do something doesn't make it good. Doing it with the right intention and the right spirit and the right heart, that's what honors God. Motive matters. So, motive is more than motion. But to be for serving the Basin is more than motion. It's not about a battle. It's not about an action. It's about motivation. Motive is much clearer when life is on the line, right? We rarely struggle to see men or women on the front lines of war fighting with the wrong motives. They're fighting with the motive of staying alive. They get it. They're all in together. So when we choose to be for the Basin without an ulterior motive, it changes us. It changes everything around us. It changes our circle of influence. It changes what God has in front of us. When we choose to lead a group, to start a Bible study, to schedule a lunch, to connect at Crossroads, to go on a mission trip, to serve the food bank, to serve one of the other nonprofits that we're highlighting this month, it changes us. It brings into focus what it really means to be for the Basin. And it's that change that will change us, to change our world. And you may be thinking, all right, I get it. I feel this little maybe tug. Maybe you've felt this tug in the past to maybe you need to do something to make an impact in your community or here at Crossroads. But can I challenge you to process, because there is more at stake than you can imagine. Way more at stake than you can imagine. A student's life could be impacted. A kid's life could be impacted by that step of obedience. And so will you look at this? If you're a follower of Christ, will you open your mind and spirit to hear from God in the next couple of minutes this morning? Will you do that for me? And examine the motive. So why? Why should I serve the Basin? Why should I do that? There's a book called Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, and Jim Cymbala is a pastor in New York City. And before he started the church, kind of the reason, he says, I despaired at the thought that my life might pass me without God moving greatly on my behalf. He said, I'm gonna do something. Even with all the excuses, I'm gonna do something. Why did he choose to serve? Because he despised the thought that his life would pass him by. This week at the Global Leadership Summit, last week rather, one of the speakers framed it this way. They said, I'm gonna be dead far longer than I'm alive. I need to make the time I'm alive count. And I might add to that, you need to make the time that you're dead. You need to prepare for that time by serving in this life and making it count. So in Jesus' life, there are three kind of back-to-back things that happen that I want us to look at. And each of those stories, little short stories, give us a window in what it means to serve the Basin. So I want you to jot them down, follow along with the stories. All right, can we do that together? We here? Here's the first thing, engage your purpose. Why do I serve the Basin? Because it engages our purpose. It engages our purpose. And so let's look in Matthew chapter 14 at the story that at the experience that Jesus has. And he chose anyway, even when it got tough, to engage his purpose. Matthew chapter 14, when Jesus heard what had happened. Well, we really can't know what Jesus is experiencing without knowing what happened, right? What had happened was when Jesus had heard that his friend John the Baptist died. That's what this experience. John the Baptist was Jesus' childhood friend. John the Baptist was the guy who baptized Jesus. John the Baptist also was a preacher of Jesus' teachings. He took Jesus' teachings, he taught them elsewhere. John the Baptist, the Bible says, paved the way for Jesus. And John the Baptist was beheaded on a bet because he did not take away, he refused to give in on the teaching that Jesus had taught. He said, this is truth. And so they said, off with your head. And the foundation of Jesus' ministry for the very first time is brought into question. Because who is this guy that even his close friends are allowed to be killed? We thought he was God. We thought he could do cool stuff. We thought he could resurrect the dead. We've never seen him put a head back on somebody. Can he do that? I mean, if you're a disciple, that's what you're wondering. Who is this guy that even his close friends die when they don't back down from that belief? So Jesus, here's what happened. He's lost his childhood best friend, and he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. So even today, we have what are called paparazzi. In the Bible, most of the time, paparazzi, you can just exchange the word crowd for paparazzi, right? So hearing of this, the crowd, or people, right? They did what people do. They're curious. How is this guy who's a popular teacher going to respond to the fact that his best friend has died? We've seen great power. Is he going to start throwing thunderbolts or lightning? Is thunder even bolt? I think just lightning bolts. But lightning bolts down to Herod who killed him. Is that what's going to happen here? I mean, they're wondering what's going to happen. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. And then Jesus landed on the beach and said, he saw a large crowd, and he had compassion. Even when it was challenging, even when it didn't make sense, even when Jesus was in pain, even when he was hurting, he chose to have compassion on these people, and he healed their sick. Even in the brokenness, Jesus chose to walk forward. Everyone's confused, wondering, is he going to keep going forward the way he's been going forward? And he chose instead to engage his purpose for a difference, to make an impact. So the story goes on. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Jesus is healing people. They're running out of daylight. There's not enough restaurants, right? We talked about this just a couple of months ago, a little bit about this story. This may sound kind of familiar. It says, send the crowds away so they can get villages and buy themselves some food. That's what the disciples tell Jesus. Jesus says, they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. We talked about how Jesus tells them, you do it. You're the one who's supposed to do it, which leads to the second point. Why do you serve the Basin? To use our gifts. You use the gifts that God's given you. Jesus says, hey, I've already given you what you need to get out there and do it. You do it. And so I want you to think about this kind of experience. You've got Jesus standing there with his 12 disciples in front of a group of people, and they whisper in Jesus' ear, we don't have enough food. And the disciples look over the crowd and Jesus looks over the crowd and says, you feed them. Well, Jesus, what you want me to do? Right? I mean, what am I going to do? So, long story short, they end up with some food, and they're asked to take a step of faith, to use their gifts in a way that would honor God. And that's what God's asking us to do. He's saying, use your gifts in a way that honors me. Use your gifts. You do it. We're faced many times with the question when that tug gets to our spirit is, do I trust God enough to use my gifts? Do I trust God enough to get in the middle of something that I don't know about, whether it's engaging students or leading a group or just being vulnerable in my own small group? Do I trust God enough to do that? It's tough to use gifts that we don't know exists, right? It's tough to use gifts if we don't know what they are. And so as a Christian, here's what I know. We don't have time to go detail into spiritual gifts this morning, but I want to give you these two truths, two principles. One, every follower of Christ has a spiritual gift. And number two, no follower of Christ has every spiritual gift. And so if those two things are true, we need each other, and all of us have a gift. I'm not an advocate of spiritual gifts inventories, because sometimes it can mislead us, but it's a great tool. I'm an advocate of using it as a tool to find out what our gifts are, to have a conversation about it. And so here, I want you to, this morning, and you can do it at lunch, have a conversation with your small group when you guys get started back. If you text the word gift to 77453, you can do it now, and so that you'll remember to do it later. I'm not going to judge you. I can't see you anyway. It's too dark. But take the opportunity. It's also printed on your handout. Take the opportunity. Text that in there. It'll send you a text. You just fill out some information and a link to, you can take a spiritual gifts inventory to understand what your gifts are. Once you know what they are, it's easier to match that with what God is leading you to do. See if those things match up and use the gifts that God has given you. As we discover, the disciples take a step of faith. They do things. God says, you do it. I've given you what you need. You do it. The question for us is, will we trust him? The third thing I want you to jot down, grow your faith. Why do we serve the Basin? Because it grows our faith. It grows our faith. People tell their stories. And they talk about how I was gonna serve and I couldn't do it, and then I decided to do it, and I went all in, and I was in way over my head. I didn't know how to do it, and God showed up, right? Or I didn't think that I could ever make an impact, and then this person called, and their life was altered and changed because I just did what God told me to. Many people don't feel qualified. You don't feel trained. You just heard about an opportunity and they step in and God shows up in their life. It's the family in your neighborhood that you've been thinking about inviting over to build a relationship, but for whatever reason, you haven't got there yet. It's the student ministry opportunity that our church has where 500 kids a weekend across all of our campuses are asking, does anyone care about my generation? It's the leadership development group that maybe you've been invited to. It's the Night of Light Halloween event that we're gonna roll out in a little bit that you're being recruited for. It's the nonprofit that's been highlighted across your campus this weekend. Or maybe it's being a part of a program that works in schools, Club 252, to impact and teach kids about the Bible. Maybe it's being a part of the next campus we launch and committing to being a part of that team to serve a community that's different than yours, or maybe it's a community that you live in. Maybe it's a mission trip, but whatever it is, when we take that step, things change. So I've got 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my wife is pregnant. And yes, we know what causes that. No, we're not willing to give it up, all right? But when my kids go to the pool, they really, really, really love to jump in the pool. But the first time they ever went to the pool, they were terrified, right? I mean, you think about it. You have kids or grandkids. You remember those days. The first time they get to the edge, and like my daughter is, she's really scared, and she's kind of on the edge, and she wants to know, like, can I do it? Can I trust you? And she's looking down, and basically I hold her and set her in the water, right? And you do that a couple of times, and then eventually she says, take a step back. Now, after, I don't know, several hours in the pool, when we get in the pool, she runs to the edge and she's like, Daddy, back up. And I'm backing up, and like, here's the edge of the pool, I'm backing up. She's like, back up. I'm like, honey, you're gonna flop right in that water and sink like a lead balloon. It's not gonna make it. Like, it just isn't gonna happen. Like, she has more faith in me than even is worth. Like, I can't catch her. I can't do what she wants me to. And think about that in the scope of serving Christ. If we'll just jump the first time, God will hold on to us and set us in the water, right? The first time. And then you take another step and another step and another step. And eventually you're saying, God, keep going. I can do more. I can do more. Will you let me do more? Except the difference between me and God is he doesn't have a range that he can catch you. He doesn't have a range that he can equip you for. God can equip you for whatever, because if we're for the Basin, then we're following what God is saying. He's saying, I'm for you. I'm for the Basin. I want to help equip you what you need to do to make an impact on your circle of influence. He's asking today, do you trust me enough to use your gifts and grow in a way that's meaningful and makes an impact? And he's not just asking you. He started the first time asking this question to a group of disciples on a boat, or on the shoreline after getting off of a boat 2,000 years ago, and this is the rest of that story. He said, we only have 5 loaves. Jesus says, you feed them. The disciples look back and say, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish, 7 pieces of food. There's 12 of us. What do you want us to do? Jesus said, bring them to me. He said, okay, all right. You're on the edge of the pool. Here's the first, just bring them to me. Okay, I can do that. I can bring you the food, Jesus. I can do that part. It says, then he gave them disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. I highlight that because I think maybe we read over that because we probably know the end of the story. And it doesn't have the impact that it should. Think about this. 7 items of food split into 12 baskets. What did the disciples have to do? What was their faith step? Jesus put it in the basket. He prayed over it. We know from other stories. What was the step of faith? Oh, these disciples were so great. Their step of faith was reaching in the basket. Just reach in the basket. Hand it to a person. That's the one item I have. And the step of faith is going, all right, Jesus, is there going to be more in here? Just reach in the basket. Just keep reaching in the basket. That's what the disciples did. Their form of service was just reaching in the basket. Just keep reaching in the basket until 12 men spread out across 5,000 families and fed them because they just kept reaching in the basket. Your influence may not be 5,000 families. Your influence might be a few hundred people. It might be just a few people. I don't know what it is, but whatever circle of influence God has given you, He's asking you, will you just reach in the basket for the Permian Basin? Will you just reach in the basket? Will you take that little step of faith? I'll set you in the water. You're going to be fine but it's just that little bit of faith. Will you reach in the basket? And the question we're asking is, will you be for the basin and serve the basin? Will you be the hands and feet of Jesus? The disciples took a step. They overcame their fear, but the story doesn't end there. That step of faith went from just Jesus setting them into the water to that giant leap that my daughter now wants to do every time we go to a pool. And it's that leap, it's the tension we feel when we're talking about this thing. That's Jesus trying to stretch our faith. Will we be for the basin and serve the basin? The most common reason we say no is because of fear and inadequacy. We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we have what it takes. And can I tell you this morning, church, that's a lie from Satan. It's not true in your life. It's not true anywhere in your life. God has equipped you. He's gifted you. He's committed to you. If you'll take that step of faith, I will be there to catch you. As silly as it looks, when I'm trying to talk my daughter off of jumping off of the pool, other parents are like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're 4. Come on, jump. You know He's going to catch you. He's done paid for you. Like the last 4 years of meals. Think about all that money. And you're still paying. You're on the medical bills 4 years later, right? Think about all the investment in that child. And Jesus is saying, think about all the investment that I have in you. I'm not going to let you just fall off. Fear, inadequacy. We think we don't have what it takes. So this is how Jesus deals with that for His disciples. He says, shortly before dawn, Jesus went to them walking on the lake. So Jesus, after He gets done feeding these people, the disciples get on a boat. You should know the story. You may know the story. Jesus gets on sends the disciples across the boat. He goes to get that solitude He was looking for. He gets done about dawn, and He's gone to find His disciples walking across the lake. And when the disciples saw Him walking on the lake, they were terrified. They said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it's I, don't be afraid. So Peter says, okay, take a step back, Jesus. Take a step back in the pool. Take one step back. Let me see if I could try this. Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Okay. Jesus says, come. Just like I tell him, just come, honey. It'll be fine. Peter got down out of the boat. He walked across the water. He came towards Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately, Jesus reached out His hand and caught him. You of little faith, why do you doubt? Peter says, okay, Jesus, I'm going to give this a try. He doubts a little bit. There's a whole other story there. But he took the step of faith. He chose to make an impact. And Jesus taught them the difference between knowing and doing. So big difference between knowing and doing. The number one reason that ever gets back to our team, why somebody leaves a church, well, they just weren't feeding me. And I would say maybe you left because you were spiritually obese and you weren't actually doing what Jesus said you were supposed to do. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I just did, all right? There's a big difference between knowing and doing. And serving, getting active, doing what Jesus is telling you to do, that's what it means to grow in your faith, to use your gifts and to engage your purpose. Head knowledge is not enough. Being a good person is not enough. If we are going to embrace our faith, embrace serving the basin, embrace being for the basin, then it requires us to serve all. And as the people of Crossroads, we are going to be for the basin and not against it. So what does this look like? How do I live this out in my life? Let me tell you what it means. It means that you're not a parking lot attendant. You're connecting the power of Christ to the people who drive in the parking lot. That you're not a child care worker. You're tilling a child's spiritual garden. You're not a mother trying to survive with small kids. You're a spiritual mentor to miniature humans. You're not a boss using people for your end goals. You're a leader with influence over the families represented in your organization. You're not a crotchety Permian Basin resident that thinks you only live here because you can't make it anywhere else. You're a child of God who's placed you here for a purpose. This is the mindset of what it means to be for the Basin. This is the way that we serve the Basin. And then there's the what ifs. What if I lead a group and I don't know the answer? What if I serve and I don't know anyone? What if the students don't think I'm cool? They're not. You're not cool. Just get over it. What if the kids throw up on me? They will. It's very predictable. What if my neighbor thinks I'm weird? What if? You're here, sitting in the seat that frankly, whatever campus you're on is pretty comfortable because someone got over their what if. Will you get over your what if today? Will you take the opportunity to be for the Basin? Will you take advantage of the opportunity that's right in front of you? Serving is more than motions. Why we do things matters. And so let's get our head right and get in the game and find a way to make an impact in the world that God's placed us in. I'm gonna tell you about something really cool, a way you can serve. And this is it's a big event and a big cool thing to do, but this isn't a lifestyle of serving. This is an event and an opportunity to serve. We had this cool learning. If you're unaware, we have 2 other physical locations in towns around the Permian Basin, and we're expecting a 4th. We're also pregnant as a church, expecting a 4th here in the next couple of months, around the same time that my child's due. So ironic, right? And so we're expecting this 4th. And so as you look at it, right, one of the things that we got to do was debrief a big event we did last year. We called it Night of Light. We've been doing it for a number of years. And when we started the campuses in Andrews and Monahans, we said, we're gonna do this Night of Light event. It's gonna make an impact. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome, right? And so we started doing it. And you know what happened? We looked up and we saw in Andrews and Monahans, they're doing the event way better than we are in Odessa. It's bigger, like especially proportionate. And more people are going, how is that possible? Like, we're the ones who know what we're doing. We're supposed to be helping you. Isn't that crazy when like your kids teach you something? And you're like, I was supposed to know everything. And so we started dissecting it and figuring out, why is it so much more successful? You know what we figured out? We figured out it was a partnership. They had entered into partnerships with the city of Andrews and the city of Monahans. They had rallied the entire city behind an event that would serve their community. So you know what we decided to do? To humbly learn and say, how can we do that in Odessa? So, you know, we've decided to work at a partnership with the city of Odessa. We've been working on it for several months. And we've decided to take the event, assuming everything goes through and all the approvals are given and all the money is there and whatever, right? We're gonna take the event, we're gonna shut down downtown Odessa, and we're gonna throw the biggest party that you've ever seen and serve the city of Odessa. So we can take the learnings from there, and we're gonna glorify God in the process because we're gonna be for the Basin, and we're gonna serve the Basin. It's an opportunity for you to choose to be for the Basin in that capacity. But we're not gonna ask you to wait a couple of months. We'll give you more details on that. We're gonna ask you to do it today with one of these. This is a card that you're gonna get handed our guest services team on the way out. And I want you to take as many of these as you need, but I want this card to represent for you what it looks like to serve the Basin. I don't know what it means. Maybe you're saying, God is prompting me to sign up to serve in that ministry, or God's prompting me to go here and serve, or God's prompting me to have a conversation with my neighbor. Whatever it is, right? I want you to take that card, leave it on your dashboard, or give it to somebody. Maybe you're buying somebody's dinner, you're leaving a ridiculous tip. Maybe you're buying somebody's coffee because you're for the Basin. Find a way to exercise that, to serve, and to start a lifestyle of serving the people of our communities, to make an impact. And don't throw that card away until you've accomplished what that thing in your mind is right now. Let me close with this. When I was a kid, this scripture meant the world to me. It said, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And the reason it meant the world to me, I grew up in southern Pennsylvania. That makes me a Yankee, and I know there's a D. Yankee starts with a D. I get it, right? Some of you will get that on Tuesday, or you're too offended to laugh. That's fine. But, so I was a kid, and in the house I grew up in, there was these window treatments. And these window treatments like hung down from the top of the ceiling. I don't even know what they're called. They have a name. Even if I knew the name, I don't know anybody else in the world knows the names of these things. But they're like little wooden things. And more importantly, my mom still is pretty artistic and crafty and stuff. And so I think it was her, she had stenciled or freehand painted this verse right here. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Above the windows, and that's an old picture. But I thought about my life and how it was shaped by that. Every time I walked out the front door, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord every day, whether or not I knew it, whether or not I believed it, wherever I was in my faith journey, that thing was always on the wall every time I left the house. And I was reminded that I'm not my own, I'm here to serve. In church, we're not our own. We're here to serve the Permian Basin, because we're for the Basin. And we're going to make an impact. We're going to serve people until they believe that Jesus is who he says he is. We're going to be the hands and feet of Christ. So whatever that step for you is today, I'm going to pray for you that God will give you the courage to take that card and make an impact. Father, we're grateful. We're grateful that you love us. We're grateful for the sacrifice of Jesus, that investment that he made in every one of our lives who are followers of Christ. And Father, those of us who are followers of Christ, would you give us the courage to take the card we're going to take on the way out? Well, first, would you give us the courage to take the card? Because it means something. And then would you give us the push this week to leave it on our dashboard, to put it on our mirror in our house, to remind us to serve in a way that makes an impact in the circle of influence that you've placed us in, to be for the Permian Basin. Father, for those who may be skeptics, maybe you're here and you're far from Christ, you're saying, I don't know if I even believe this stuff, I'm just checking it out. If you want to have a conversation, we'll have some of our pastors down front. They'd love to pray with you. They'd love to engage you in that conversation. And maybe you're saying, you know what? If this is what true Christianity is supposed to be about, I want to be one. We'd love to have that conversation. Father, would you help us to engage our purpose, to use our gifts, Father, to grow us, that we can make an impact. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thanks so much for being here. We hope you have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next week.